Good morning, YouTube. Actually, you know what? Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching this live stream. We're broadcasting worldwide, although I'm assuming most of you are here in Northern California. Here to talk about the Oakland A's 35 games remaining in their regular season. Now, there's a couple different things to point out automatically. We're at a difficult spot right now. They've lost a handful of games. The recent week or two have not gone great. In fact, the last road trip was rough. This homestand so far has been brutal. And oh yeah, their next opponent after today off is the New York Yankees on an 11-game win streak for 4 straight days at the Coliseum. So let's go ahead and dive into the biggest themes. I'll do the worry, I'll do the hope, and then we'll get into 5 other topics here. So the worries are obvious. Right now, the A's have dropped 4 straight, and in pretty monumental fashion, those first 3. They've also lost 8 out of their last 10. They right now are out of a playoff spot, as they were yesterday, for the first days since April 16th. That's something they've held on to, and of course, does holding on to a playoff spot in late April, early May, or June, does it really matter when it comes down to the end? No, but it paints a picture of somewhere they were that they are not right now, and that's twofold. That's how they've slipped a little bit, and that's also how some of the other competitive teams have made their moves. Seattle, who they just played and is chasing them, they're clearly surging. They've won 11 of their last 13. I'll get into the Seattle factor in just a second. But on that note, the A's are battling on 2 fronts. It's not necessarily just the West, and it's not just the wild card. Clearly, your preference would be win the division, avoid that wild card game. But they're battling on 2 fronts, meaning that they have to pay attention to the Houston Astros, the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, and the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Seattle Mariners. This is not simple. This is a complicated race down the stretch. The other worries are your team minus 3 critical players. If I would have told you out of spring training that you'd be minus Chris Bassett, minus Ramon Laureano, and minus Stephen Piscotty for the final stretch, that would not have been reassuring back then. However, knowing what we know now, some of their acquisitions before the deadline, clearly that smooths some of this over. But again, this is going down the stretch minus critical players. And every team has their setbacks and their injuries, and in this case, a suspension. But to the point, it's a concern that this team is not at full strength, as maybe some of the other ones are. And then last but not least, one of the biggest worries is rispy business. No, not crispy, although it does get you crispy when the A's don't capitalize with runners in scoring position. This has been an ongoing theme all season long. It's there sometimes, then it's not. That's obviously one of our main points still to come. You know what, though, while I'm here, if you've just started on the video and you like this type of content, can I ask right now that maybe you consider subscribing to the channel? I'm trying to grow this thing out, build it out as a platform for you and I to have these deeper layer and level conversations. And also by the end of this video, if you actually like it and you think other people on YouTube should see it, give it a thumbs up. That'll help recommend it to others. Okay, that's all the worry. And I had to just get that out of the way because, I always like to bring it to the hope. In terms of time and distance and what's left in this season and how close the A's are, all of this is doable. We're not asking for a miracle necessarily down the stretch. Some years it's taken that. Like, for example, 2012, it took a miracle to win the division. That's not necessarily the case here. It's all within grasp. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but my point is that all of this can make sense mathematically. Another hope would be the 4 reinforcements. I guess that's what I'm calling Andrew Chafin, Yan Gomes, Josh Harrison, and Starling Marte. I mean, where would the A's be without the benefit they've provided in the month since the trade deadline? Honestly, these guys have given you everything as advertised in all their different respects and all their different roles. This truly was the best A's trade deadline probably in 20 years. People go back to Jermaine Dye. People go back to Ricky Henderson before that. I agree. I'm saying right now that this year, and I hope it gets talked about a lot, no matter what the end result is or not, this was the push. I mean, the front office assistance here doesn't get much better. The A's are due to ride the wave. That's what this season's been all about. Win 13 in a row, go through a rough patch. Win 7 in a row recently, and now this. They've, lost, 8 of their last 10 or 11? So if you believe in the wave, and you believe that that is the theme of this season, and you believe in the amplitude and the wavelength of how the year has gone, then yes, you'd have to believe that this thing is going to turn around, naturally. Another piece of hope is that the A's are going to face Houston, who they're chasing, head-to-head 6 more times. I believe they make up 2 of the final 3 series of the season. I think it goes homestand against Houston, on the road against Seattle, and then on the road to close it out against the Astros. I think those are the final 3 series. But that opportunity remains. Now, let's be honest. If you're Houston, I don't know if you want to see the A's, and the A's are chasing you. I don't know if you want to see the A's that much down the stretch. That is leaving if you don't buy yourself cushion and seal the deal right there, the Astros are in trouble. So that is going to leave the door open for the A's so long as they're in striking distance. Now, they've got to perform in those Houston games, but you understand the point is that it will be there in those 6 games so long as they keep it, close enough. Go into those 6, down 2 games, plenty of time to make it right. Down 1 game, plenty of time to make it right. Down 4 games, that might be a little bit more difficult. The last point I want to make here is that there are options everywhere. What do I mean by that? Despite the fact that you're down Bassett and Laureano and Piscotty, and honestly, and down Trevor Rosenthal all season, and down Mike Fiers virtually all season, there are still other people who have stepped up and stepped in. I'm talking about a Paul Blackburn in the rotation. I'm talking about getting Chad Pinder back, or Seth Brown coming up and when he plays regularly doing a great job in right field. There's options a lot of places. You saw Matt Chapman had to sit out the other day with a bruised foot, so Josh Harrison can play third. There are, and I should have titled this better, there are so many interchangeable pieces for the A's down the stretch that should be viewed as a good thing. They are not like short and stuck with it, for example, at second base or in right field or in left field. They're not patching anything up right now. Yeah, they're minus a few that would make them stronger, but they're not trying to do any patch jobs at this point. So that brings me to 5 kind of big themes of what's left in these 35 games. And by the way, these 35 games are going to go by super quick. This is about 20% of their season that remains. The Seattle factor is pretty simple. Oakland has played poorly against Seattle this season, 4-8 record-wise. For a while this year, it felt like, and that's kind of my bottom point here, the A's were getting outdone by the very much troubled Texas Rangers. If the A's didn't sweep them in that last series, they were still down 7-6. Obviously, now with 3 more wins, Oakland leads the season series 9-7. But 4-8 is Oakland against the Mariners. Now, they're not a bad team. Don't get me wrong. Like, they've played especially well as of late. But you don't want to be at the end of the season knowing that Seattle was one of the teams that took away 3 or 4 or 5 wins that you should have had that made a difference between you in a playoff spot or not, or you winning the division or not. The good news is 7 head-to-head matchups remain between the A's and Mariners. So they've played a decent amount. They've played a big enough sample size for us to all see that Seattle, and especially Mitch Haniger, gives the A's problems. They've got to right this ship. Those 7 matchups, by the way, are all in the final 2 weeks of the season. I know we're only, 5 weeks away from the end of the year, 5 to 6? But that's going to be critical for the A's, how well they can perform against Seattle. Texas, I think there's only just that 1 series left. You got to finish that one strong, honestly. The A's got to get 2 wins out of that one. But they have got to at least get back to 500 against Seattle by the end of this season. If they don't, honestly, I'm telling you, that's when you look back on and regret. It's also interesting because Seattle at the trade deadline, they sent away their closer, Kendall Graveman, and you got to be thinking inside their clubhouse like, wait a second. They're trying to make a push. They weren't dead yet in the standings, and their front office is taking away one of their biggest tools to close out games. Not only that, but over this past weekend, Seattle got beat 2 of 3 times, and I mean beat handily by the Houston Astros. And that was kind of a first punch. The A's had the opportunity here in Oakland, 2 games, to throw the knockout punch in the standings. Couldn't do it. Seattle didn't get put away. Now they're here to make some noise. So the A's have done well against the Angels. Like, I'm looking against the division. They've done well against the Angels this year. The Astros are very tough. But these other 2 teams right here are ones that have given them respective problems. And the Seattle factor is going to be big down the stretch. Let's move on to Starling Marte. Now, this part's going to be about Starling Marte. I suppose it's kind of also about all the new guys in one fell swoop as well here too. Starling Marte, among the major league leaders in steals. He was already in that conversation with Miami. He's come over to the A's, and he has literally given us a flashback to Rickey Henderson. And I know plenty of people are going to give me heat and say, oh, how dare you compare what Rickey did over a career to what Starling is doing right now. I understand. This is not a direct comparison. This is not a one-to-one. I'm saying right now that Starling Marte, the way he's playing, getting on base, what he's doing when he's on base, he reminds me of what Rickey Henderson was doing in all of those best years. Starling Marte has the ability to impact a game by getting a good hit. And I mean a good hit like an opposite field hit, something out of the zone or away, an outside pitch that he's able to take to right field, get on base, doesn't have to put a whopping swing on it. Now he's on first. Guess what? It instantly turns into a double. He'll steal second. I love the fact that Starling Marte is not intimidated to steal third base on a regular basis and to disrupt the pitcher when he's on. Think about him batting second, and you have Matt Olson following him. So now Marte's on second. Now he's doing all the dancing around. He's distracting the pitcher up there. And you have that pitcher trying to face Matt Olson while all that's going on. Starling Marte has definitely shored up the outfield, specifically playing center. Who knew when you got him that Ramon would not be available? Remember, that was a conversation. Who's going to play center? Who's going to play right? Ramon told Bob Melvin, hey, that's your guy. Don't worry about me. And also in the lineup, you needed a 2-hitter. This frees up Jed Lowry to hit in other places in the lineup. Gives somebody ahead of Matt Olson as a little bit of protection. So Starling Marte is part of the best A's deadline that they've had, honestly, like I said before, in 20 years. And Marte is the headliner, and I love Josh Harrison. I love Andrew Chafin. I love Yan Gomes, all in their different respective ways. It's just that Marte is going to get, the brunt of the credit here, and he's kind of the front man of this band, if you will. That's probably the fair way to put it. The band is great. The whole band is great, don't get me wrong. But Marte is the front man. So that's pretty cool. But here's the deal. He and the others, they've been on an incredible pace this season. They've continued on that incredible pace this season here with Oakland. But what happens if it tails off just a little bit? Honestly, it does feel like in the last month, the 4, what did I call them before? The 4 impact makers, I forget what it was, but those 4 acquisitions, they have largely carried this team in respective ways. I'm just saying, I certainly hope they can go strong in the final 35. I would love it. We all would. They would too. But that's a lot of weight to be putting on just that one group and not kind of have all the others chipping in equally. So my point is they're on an incredible pace, ... But, those trade moves have been, honestly, the best part of the last month. It catalyzed that 7-game winning streak. It righted their ship after struggling in June and July. July was their first losing month record since May of 2019. At the end of the month, you get those players, you turn it around in August, and now you're struggling as a group. This group of 4 is not necessarily struggling, but overall, the team is. So that's a factor down the stretch. Let's move on to the rotation. Now, the rotation, to me, has had an overall solid showing all season long. And knock on wood, knock on everything I have, let's be as superstitiously safe as possible here. How many times have the A's used 17, 18, 19 starters in a season? This year, it has been so reliable. And Bassett, with the unfortunate injury, he'd still be in there. It would be pretty much these 5, Bassett, Minaya, Montas, Caprillion, and Irvin, basically since May. And that's when Caprillion came up and was injected into the rotation after Luzardo was out with the injury and then sent down, and Mike Fiers was quickly in and out. But I love the fact that it's been so consistent and it's overall been a great showing this season. All of these starters have set a respective bar. We haven't seen one that you say, well, I don't know what they're capable of, and I don't know why they're getting turns. They've all shown at some point that they've been the carrier of the rotation, that they've made a statement. So I love that. And I also love the fact that, Paul Blackburn gets this phone call literally right after Chris Bassitt got hurt. Hey, we need you to fly in tomorrow morning to Chicago, make the start tomorrow. He got there in the afternoon, pitched that night on the south side of Chicago. A's didn't win, but he was magnificent. The 2 starts he's had since coming in have been awesome. And quite honestly, the stories of James Caprillion and Cole Irvin, Cap and Cole, they've been awesome this year. Guys that, I don't know if you knew what to expect, but they were put in an opportunity. They instantly latched. You would hope that for Paul Blackburn down the stretch here. He's had, opportunities since 2017, 18, every year kind of up and down and in and out. But this, down the stretch, if he can make, 6 more starts, latch on here, this would be awesome. This would fit in a great mold of stories. Same thing with Caprillion, same thing with Cole Irvin. Let's hope that's the case. That would greatly help the A's. Chris Bassitt as somebody who could stabilize your rotation has been so important. And yeah, he's the ace, he's the all-star, he's the one in the Cy Young conversation. But Chris Bassitt has been the guy to set the tone. And there is a fear that maybe the rotation goes into more ruts without kind of him as a reset. You certainly hope that isn't the case. And by the way, I do kind of wonder if Bassitt's still going to keep in touch, send some videos, do some FaceTimes. That would be awesome. Or if he's just flat out around and able to do it. I know the surgery was just yesterday. Give him a while. But his presence would seemingly be great for this team. And that brings me to this. Now that you don't have Bassitt right now, who is the A's Game 1 starter? You know exactly what I mean by that. Who's the guy in Game 1 of a playoff series that you're starting? Because before Chris's injury, clearly it was him. Now it's not as defined. I mean, Montas and Minaya seem to be the front runners in consistent performance, experience, all of the above. But to my point, you don't have the obvious number 1 Game 1 starter in a postseason series right now. So if one of those people could establish that, maybe it's Frankie. He's pitched well lately. You kind of really need somebody to establish that by the end of this season. Timely offense, or sometimes quite untimely. And I don't mean to single out Matt Olson there with the photo, because he's been among the most consistent this year offensively. And let me just say while I'm here, he's gonna hit 40. He's at least gonna flirt with it. I definitely think he's right around the corner from it, on pace. He should get there, and I hope that for him. I know that will help the team, and I hope there's more homers with runners on base than solo shots. But Matt Olson getting to 40, special for him, important to the team. I hope that happens. But timely offense, or lack of, has been the number 1 issue all season. You could talk to me about pitching and the bullpen and sometimes team defense and whatever. But the fact that the A's have runners on and a lot of times can't convert those base runners into runs, that's been it all season. Now, another part of this, which I uncovered last night, I suspected this was the case, but it was confirmed. The A's lead Major League Baseball in solo homers this year. That's a little bit good, but that's largely not great. You want to get all the runs you can with runners on base. You want to get all the homers you can with runners on base, obviously. They don't have very many 3-run shots. I think they only have 1 grand slam this year. The point being is that maybe A's hitters are being pitched differently with nobody on. Maybe they're being pitched more aggressively. Maybe they're not able to capitalize in at-bats where, like I said, they're being pitched differently with runners on, pitched more conservatively, seeing less hittable pitches, seeing less challenge pitches. Clearly, when they are getting these opportunities, they're leading baseball in going yard. That's a frustration factor. The A's make their money hitting homers. That's how they score runs. That's how they win a lot of games. But when nobody's on this year, that is so frustrating. They've gone in spells of 12 homers as a team in a row, all solo shots. I go back to runners in scoring position. In this month of August alone, we've seen a streak where they hit 308 with runners in scoring position. And right now they're hitting about a $148 with runners in scoring position. That difference right there of 150 points. That is largely going to determine several wins or not. Games that you get or games that you don't. Just that stat right there. Throw everything else out for a second. Starts, bullpen, closing games, whatever. That hurts. And just going back to the human part, the frustrating part, the opportunity is there. Runners in scoring position means that you got a guy to second base or you had a guy at second and third base and you couldn't bring him home. So the A's, it's not like their offense is completely dormant. It's not like the chances are never there. They can't get anything going. They get something going. They just can't finish it. And lastly, it brings me to what's the result of this? We know what they're capable of. So is it gripping the bat a little bit tighter with runners on? Are they pressing? Is it a mental thing? It'd be one thing if physically you didn't have the right guys to do it, but you're getting runners on and you have the right guys at the plate. It just hasn't been happening. This, to me, is probably the number one issue for the A's down the stretch and into the postseason. It's what to pay attention to. The bullpen. Is this the last one? Have I got to 5 things already? I'm not sure. The bullpen. Largely the same group as what started the season in relief for Oakland and Bob Melvin. And that's crazy because it was very much a question mark April into May. At some point, late June, it solidified. It actually became an exclamation point. You started looking at stats. You saw that Petit came into who he was. And it brings me to the next comment here on Sergio Romo. He specifically has embodied what the A's bullpen has been through this season. Rough start, turned into Mr. Almost Every Day, Mr. Reliable. And when I say evolution, you know what he's capable of in his career, but it definitely didn't start out that way this year for the A's. He's gotten his pitches back. He's gotten his confidence back. He's getting the roles. He's getting the opportunity. So Sergio has embodied what the whole bullpen has been through for me this season. I don't have a lot of question about them right now. I understand the last 4 games, especially 3 of the last 4 games, they've been largely responsible for the end result. But hang on a second. Let's go back to that runners in scoring position thing. The bullpen had slimmest of margins, like literally 3 days in a row, and they couldn't hang on. But if you're the A's and you're scoring on average 2 runs a night, 2 or fewer, that's largely not enough to get the job done on a regular basis. So yes, bullpen is to be talked about, but so is the run support that wasn't there. So bullpen, I still do have a lot of confidence in them. I certainly wish Trevor Rosenthal was part of this equation. Think back. I mean, the A's lost their starter lost their closer out of spring training. Thought they were going to get him back for a late push. Turns out won't even throw a pitch for the A's this year. That's so frustrating for a group that had planned around this. I think Trevino's done an admirable job. I'll touch on him in a second. But they were shorthanded to begin. They will need A.J. Puck. You have to think of A.J. Puck as almost like another deadline acquisition. The A's had him ready, could use him in a multitude of spots. We haven't really seen him go 2 or 3 innings yet in a relief appearance, but I do know he's capable of that this year, the way they've stretched him out just a little bit. They need A.J. Puck, especially down the stretch, to find a role. If you know kind of that Petit's going to clean up after a starter, and you know Diekman and Trevino are going to be late, and Sergio might be your 7th guy, you kind of need A.J. to be also a 7th or sometimes 8th inning guy, and that's kind of where he's been used, but really solidify that role. Talked about when he got the recall, or when he came back from injury to Las Vegas, pitched well there. I think he had 26 appearances. His final 13 were nails. Really need him to nail down something with the Oakland A's in these final 35 games. That would dictate a successful season. Come up, latch on, have your role. Hopefully the season ends well, but have a great offseason knowing that you came up, you latched and you established and you contributed largely in the bullpen. They need it there. Trevino's time, I understand. The second game of the Giants series and the first game of the Seattle series. Just unbelievable. Lou has been on such a roll that all of those are abnormal situations. I'm ready to chalk him up as that. Look, at this point, you need Trevino to come back, just shut the door on his next opportunity, whether it's a narrow margin or whether it's a comfortable closing situation. Whatever it is that Bob Melvin decides to put him in, you need him to nail that thing down, move on, and get past this as soon as possible. Get him back on the horse ASAP. And the last point to make here on the bullpen is that I think when rosters expand on September 1st, this is probably the area that you want to expand into. Position player-wise, I think the A's are fine unless there's some other injury or replacement to be made. I think they're fine in the field. Certainly the rotation speaks for itself. I think when the rosters expand by 2 players, you're probably going to want to add reinforcements to the bullpen. So that brings me back full circle. 35 games remain for the A's. This is an interesting time. This is it's a difficult time right now, like in this moment. And what lies ahead in the next 4, Yankees have won 11 in a row. Now they're coming to the Coliseum for 4 straight. So A's still have the White Sox to welcome into a series, 6 more against Houston. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible, and it's going to largely go by very quickly. Can I just ask one more time, since you're here, if you like these type of videos, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And if you thought this video was worth your time, consider giving it thumbs up so that other viewers on YouTube here can check it out as well. All right, that does it. Appreciate everybody. I'll see you back tomorrow on television for A's Pregame Live.